Hello everyone, welcome back to the Tent of Abraham. I'm Tamir Kreisman from Jerusalem, Israel. This is Parashat Shmot. The names, this is the book of Exodus, Exodus 1:1 to 6:2, and this one's called Exodus. So here we are again, in bondage. How did that happen? I'm also speaking of today, and of course in Egypt, you will understand this. Everything was going so well. We were tired and poor, huddled in masses, yearning to breathe free. We built a name for ourselves. We were accepted among the locals and eventually became locals ourselves. We contributed to the GDP, the military, the economy, the intelligence, and of course, the overall blessing and abundance. So why, oh why, are our former hosts now treating us like vermin? Seems to be a reoccurring theme since Egypt. Look at what they say of us. ובני ישראל פרו וישרצו וירבו ויעצמו במאוד מאוד ותמלא הארץ אותם. The children of Israel were fruitful and swarmed and increased and became very, very strong, and the land became filled with them. What is וישרצו? Sheretz, it's an insect, creeping thing, reptile or varmint. In the Torah, the book of Leviticus in particular, we see that there are three types of shratzim. One, sheretz haaretz, the impure of the earth. Two, sheretz haof, the impure of the birds of the air. And sheretz hamayim, the impure of the fish of the sea. So what is paru? Paru veishratzu. Paru, this comes from the word pari, right? Which is a positive connotation. Now this is very interesting, because this continues our discussion of the last couple of months regarding the holy sparks and the filth. Judgment and mercy, holy sparks and the filth, this is where we're at right now. Right now and right now. So, if you got eyes and ears, please use them. We see two aspects of the children of Israel, which could also be seen as two groups. The first being fruit, right? Which means that they have been learning and teaching Torah. It's a good thing. They've also been establishing houses of study and have kept the traditions that they learned from the house of Jacob. This is already after all the sons of Jacob died. So this is the second and third generation already. They never assimilated with the Egyptians and remained pure of the darkness that was in Egypt. Now, these are fruit, and they are good. And the second group are those who have become impure with all the elements at their disposal: earth, air, and sea. Now, since we have elements of positive, holy, against negative, unholy, a separation now has to take place, right? Light and dark cannot exist at the same place. God separated them, that's why they were separated. Because before God did that, light and dark were there together at the same time. But as it was, so it will be. Think of the inner circle now as holy, the mercy, while the outer circle, the outer shell, which has elements of the inner circle in it, but are also mixed with the unholy as well. Think of like a barrier on the outside, right? It's got some elements from the good stuff inside, but also because the shell is on the outside, it also absorbs from the chitzonim, the outer parts. So now, what do you have in your hand? What do you have in your hand? You have a fruit. That's exactly what I just described. With the good stuff on the inside and the klipa, the shell, on the outside. Now that might be one way to look at it, as I'm sure there were those who really truly were righteous and never mixed with the Gentiles in Egypt. As I'm sure there have been those who were completely assimilated and abandoned the Torah and the teachings of Jacob. As we know, before they left Egypt, they stopped circumcising their children. They didn't follow the ways of God anymore. But we're going to also understand why that happened. It wasn't just because they got bored. So this, which was and still the gateway to falling away, and that is the taking of foreign wives. This is how those things are opened. Those doorways are open. Those gateways are open. That's like bringing something impure without purifying it into something pure and expecting a positive result, right? Well, again, you see from the time of Abraham all the way until today, you are not to take foreign wives, right? So when you see Jews marrying Gentile women, they fall away. The woman can convert, of course, but if they don't, even according to Ezra and Nehemiah, they said, "Hey, listen, get rid of it. It's not part of you." And so they did in order for the temple to be rebuilt. It's very clear rules, okay? From even before we got the laws of the Torah, Abraham told this, okay? To Eliezer to find a very specific wife from a very specific place for Isaac. No foreign wives. So, I believe, based on everything that we have been learning over the past few years, that the large chunk of Israel were mixed, of all, more good, more bad, and so on. Meaning that they all had good and bad in them, some more, some less. So look at us today. There are those who live according to the Torah with plenty of bad habits, and there are those who don't, with plenty of good habits, right? What makes a person a good person? We learned all about derech eretz kadma la Torah. If you are a Torah observant Jew and you do your best to live according to the Torah, but you have no derech eretz, all the Torah that you have learned and that are learning is good for nothing. In fact, it causes harm because it's complete hypocrisy. So today, just like back then, Israel are going to get squeezed. Again, today, just like back then, Israel are going to get squeezed to the point where either the bad habits, meaning sin, will be completely extinguished, or those who refuse to let go of the sin, they will be extinguished themselves. Again, death is a form of cleansing. All the Jews that died in the desert, the Israelites, they died in the desert where they sinned. It wasn't that they died and then they were going to Gehenna forever. The death was their redemption. It was a rectification. They died so that they would not go. It's a form of tikkun. But I would go even further to say that this was not how it was initially. This is what we discussed, but rather slowly but surely planned by the adversary to enslave the minds of Israel. How do you break such a strong nation? It said that not only were they giving birth, 6 to 12 babies at a time, but again, because of the blessing and the protection that they had from Jacob and then Joseph and the spiritual abundance, the Tiferet and Yesod working together, there was not a single miscarriage, right? Just like it was when the temple stood. So the Midrash says that you had women giving birth 6, 12 babies, sometimes even more, and they use the word sheretz, shratzim, specifically to scorpions who give birth to 70 babies, or like eggs and whatnot. Okay, so that's why, meaning just like almost like insects, so many, and not a single one of them died, and not only that, they all grew up to be mighty, mighty men. These were the children of the children of Israel. They were strong. Everything was good, and not only that, they were extremely, extremely wealthy. So it's not like a dude's got 30 kids. How am I going to feed them? There was an abundance of abundance. Everything was good. And Egypt, as a result, they also got the goodness, and so did the rest of the world. Now, again, how do you take out a people like this? If you look at the description, although it was meant in a negative way, which comes from the eyes of impurity, if you look at it properly, you will see the Torah over all of it. Okay, so let's see it again. Uvnei Yisrael paru veishratzu vayerbu vayatzmu bimeod meod vatemale haaretz otam. One of the things is vatemale haaretz otam, and the land became filled with them. It said that when a group of Israelites walked down the street, because they were so physically big, that they were everybody on the street. Just another thing. All right, paru, fruitful, through Torah. What is Torah? Torah is a fruit, right? The tree from the fruit from the tree. Torah study, which is chesed. This is mercy. Vaishretzu. swarmed. What is swarms? Bees swarm, insects swarm. This is aggressive, but from a positive way, through mitzvot, which you have gvura, judgment, aggression. Vayerbu, increasing in living Torah, which is tiferet, splendor. Vayatzmu, they became mighty as a result of study, which is netzach, eternal. And you have bimeod meod. The first bimeod, what is ma? Mem hey. That's the side of bina. That's also the zira and pin. But from the side, the left side of bina, it's hod, it's glory, and meod, abundance, yesod, foundation. Right. So ba meod meod. So what do you have over there? In other words, the side of impurity and darkness and filth sees the same thing that we do. What do we see? We just saw the children of Israel living exactly according to the Torah over here. According to that description that was given from the other side, we took it positive. But they look at it at the negative side as a way, because they were concerned. Why were they concerned? Because they saw what was going to happen. And again, we'll get to that too. Especially because of the words Vaishletzu. So, what is the sitra achra saying here? How is it a negative thing? These dudes right here are spreading their Torah and mitzvot all over my dark land, Egypt, remember. Darkness, land of restriction, constriction, all over my dark land, and they are igniting the dormant sparks, which is why they were there to begin with. They are infecting the inhabitants of Egypt with God. Even though it was because of the Jews living Torah that Egypt became the superpower, and all Egypt and its inhabitants, as well as the rest of the world, benefited from it, nevertheless, it is the natural worldly order of things to eliminate the Jews because of the refusal to recognize God and God's favor towards the Jewish people. The world doesn't learn because here we are again. And it's about to get smacked 1,000 times what it did back in Egypt. You see, the world is Egypt, and we are still the exiles. And this is how our oppression began. You see, just like there is a positive, there is also an opposite to that positive, a negative. There are positive sfirot, mirrored negative sfirot, 50 gates of purity, 50 gates of impurity. Meaning the same way that channels are open to spread the Torah, these are open channels. You open those channels into the filth, the sparks come through, but what else comes through? So too can they transfer filth back to the source. This is a risk, of course, that it's part of the job. You understand? You have to bring in the good while filtering out the bad, but sometimes the bad comes through. And we'll see this as well. This is also how the Erev Rav, the mixed multitude, came to be entangled with the sons of Jacob, i.e. Israel. The same way, when they went to do good, filth came through. Now, in Zohar Bereshit, Dafka, in Bereshit, Rabbi Shimon discusses the 5 groups of mixed multitudes in this world, and they are the nephilim, the fallen ones, the giborim, the mighty ones, the anakim, the giants, the rephaim, the shades, and Amalek, our good buddies. Now, when all these guys are working together in unison, it can be very dangerous, as they have the power and the knowledge and know-how to completely destroy the world, should they be kept unchecked. Last time we saw this was during the Tower of Babel, right? Which is why God had to confuse their languages so they could not communicate with one another. Nevertheless, they were all present at the time of the flood as well. So go ahead, how could it be that Amalek was present at the time of the flood before Amalek was even born? It's the same way that I say Israel and Jews, that the Jews left Egypt. It's not the physical, but the spiritual aspect. Okay, so we have the spirit of Amalek that would inhabit individuals. Amalek don't necessarily have to be self-proclaimed Aryans as Nazis. There's the spirit of Amalek even in the Arabs as well, and they're technically Ishmael. You see what I'm saying? So Amalek, let's talk about them. These guys are the worst. Now, the Amalek who remain today in the world after God destroyed the world in the flood have been ruling the world ever since the fourth exile, Edom, right? Which we are currently still in, as they became the leaders of the world, men of great power, etc. They became a means of violence towards Israel, and it is of them that it is written in Genesis 6:13 that, and God said to Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth has become full of robbery because of them. And behold, I am destroying them from the earth. ויאמר אלוהים לנוח קץ כל בשר בא לפני כי מלאה הארץ חמס מפניהם והנני משחיתם את הארץ. Again, this is from the Zohar, okay? Them, this is Amalek, of course. And because they have not been completely wiped out, again, it's the spirit. You could kill the people, but the spirit still remains. We know that it is a prophecy of current times that has yet to take place, right? Because God says, I will take them out at the end of days, which means he did not wipe them out. Physically, yes, but not the spirit. You see, there's a difference between sexual immorality and robbery. Here it says robbery. What is robbery? Now, we've discussed this before. God calls sexual immorality an abomination. It's reason enough to destroy the world, and yet, even if that society lives in peace and love with one another, God will not touch them. We also saw this with Sodom and Gomorrah. They were living like, well, the world today, basically. The only thing is, they did not rob each other until the daughter of Lot fed the stranger, and then they tied her to a roof, poured honey on her, and had bees sting her to death. Once they started cruelty towards themselves, that's when they were taken out, because that was the cry that penetrated the heavens. That's what God said, that's it, enough. Just looking for an excuse, that's the excuse. Okay, so, this is the robbery towards one another. The wickedness. This is ultimately what brings the destruction. Again, if it was just that and the sexual immoral behavior would not be there, maybe you can repent from that. But those two together, forget about it. So it starts with inviting the ra'ah, the evil, the filth, and then corruption ensues. Eventually, it's more and more and more. You have a hunger for possessions, power, and control that cannot be satiated. And it all starts from pulling from the most physical of physical aspects of our creation, which is a corruption and perversion of the most holy aspects, which is sexual immorality. 2. The nephilim, the fallen. These are the Genesis 6:2 guys. ויראו בני האלוהים את בנות האדם כי טובות הנה ויקחו להם נשים מכל אשר בחרו. The sons of, again, look how modern day Judaism tries to soften it. It says the sons of the nobles, when we all know what Elohim means. This literally means the sons of God. And we could see this in plenty other places. I got big issues with this, okay? Because you are not translating something properly for the sake of what? Trying to protect your own people from the truth? Give me a break. When the sons of God saw the daughters of man, when they were beautifying themselves, and they took for themselves wives from whoever they chose. This is Zohar. This is what he's saying. This is also what Rashi says. Don't take it with me. These are Azza and Azael who spoke to God concerning the making of man. These are also the two angels that Rashi speaks about in Bamidbar Yud Gimel, where he says, we're thrown to the earth, we're fallen from heaven during the days of Enosh. So they were jealous that God wanted to give command of the universe to such a potentially flawed creature. When God came to all the angels and said, listen, I want to make man. I want to make this guy. What's up? What do you guys think? And they said, come on, look. You know where he's going to go. If you're giving him those kind of flaws, you know where he's going. He's only headed in one direction, and that's down, right? Potentially flawed creature. They only looked at man as far as he is currently fallen. We are all in that state. But God looks at us as far as how we can be. In other words, our potential, which is just like Abraham, Isaac, and perfected through Jacob. when the angels, see, the angels are stagnant. They stay in the same, they cannot elevate themselves. They can drop, but they cannot go higher. We can. And that we are the only other creatures, a creation in the universe that can do this. God's likeness in his image, you see. And we are doing this by rectifying the world as the children of Israel. This is our job. So this began right here in Egypt through Joseph, as we can see a hinted in Genesis 41:34. Vayaseh Paro vayifkod pkidim al haaretz vechimesh et haaretz Mitzrayim b'sheva shnei hasaba. Let Pharaoh do this and appoint officials over the land and prepare the land of Egypt during the 7 years of plenty. These angels saw that ultimately they would have to be subservient, right? Pharaoh, i.e. God, is now listening to Joseph, Israel, man, I'm going to tell you who to appoint over the land, over the earth, okay? So these angels saw that ultimately they would have to be subservient to Israel, and already from the beginning attempted to knock them off the derech. Of course, they asked God in Psalms 8:5, we've discussed this, what is man that you are mindful of him? To which God replied, if you suckers were down there, you'd fall just as much as they did, if not worse. And immediately, that's where we see the verse, and the sons of God and the daughters of men, right? They were there, and they saw them, and boom, they were right there. They desired them, sexual immorality. There you go. So God dropped them and kept them here with chains that, and they've been here since way back when, since before the flood, actually. So they are immortal until the end of time. When time ends, so will they. But with them, they brought souls forth of the mixed multitude, fornicating with women. They made themselves fall from holiness. Because of this, God removed the world to come from them. You will be here in the physical. This is how long you have. You just gave up eternity for 6,000 years, 7,000 years. Meaning they would live here on earth as long as the earth stood, but then after the seventh, they would simply cease to be. Gone. Giborim, the mighty ones. Now, these guys were mixed in with Israel, and this is taken from Genesis 6:4, where it says, the nephilim were on the earth on those days, and also afterwards. I know we said the Giborim, wait. When the sons of the nobles, again, this is unbelievable, when the sons of God would come to the daughters of men, and they would bear for them. Now, they are the mighty men here, the Giborim. Hema ha-Giborim, asher me'olam anshe Hashem. They are the mighty men who were of old the men of renown. Now, this particular group came from the same ones who later sought to make a name for themselves during the days of the Tower of Babel, Genesis 11:4. And they said, come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower within its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves. V'naseh lanu Shem, anshe Hashem, people of the name, not Hashem, anshe Ha and Shem. Okay, now, look what the Zohar says. I'm quoting here. This was written almost 2,000 years ago. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. They, this group of mixed multitude, build synagogues and yeshivot, putting the scroll of the Torah and a crown upon its top in the name of Hashem, but it's not a name of Hashem, but instead it is to make a name for themselves. These are the children of the other side who overcame the children of Israel, who were blessed to be like the dust of the earth. They robbed them, shattering their work. Of them it is written in Genesis 7:19, and the waters became exceedingly powerful upon the earth. The waters, these are them, powerful upon the earth, and all the lofty mountains that were under the heavens were covered up. Yeah, in other words, who are these? These are the posers today, those that say they're doing things in the name of God, especially, synagogues and yeshivot. This is not me. This is not against my Jewish brethren. These are against the Giborim and the Rephaim and the Nephilim who pose as Jews and give us a bad name. That's who I'm speaking against. Do it for themselves. And when they're like leeches, sucking our our goodness and abundance. Next, Rephaim, shades. Know who lives among you. You could tell by their actions. It's very simple. Rephaim, the shades. If they notice a time of distress coming up, and we've actually mentioned this particular thing before, if they notice a time of distress coming upon Israel, they abandon them. I don't remember when it was, but a while back we discussed that in the end of days, when Israel are going to get squeezed, there's a large group of the posers, the fakers that are going to say, hey, I'm really not Israel, I'm really not a Jew, and they're going to hand them over. Completely disassociate. In other words, I'm a Jew as long as it's good for me, but now that the world's about to come down on Jewry and persecute, no. Here are our Jews. Go ahead, I'm not one of them. Don't worry about it. If they notice a time of distress coming upon Israel, they abandon them. If they have the power to save them, they do not want to do so. They abandon the Torah and those who study it, and instead do favors for those who worship idols. Of them it is written in Isaiah 26:14, Metim bal yachyu, Rephaim bal yakumu. The dead shall not live, and the Rephaim shall not rise. And yep, that means the resurrection of the dead, of course. Of them it is said that when Israel shall rise, their memory won't. 5. Anakim, giants. They belittle the value of those who cleave to the Torah. I look at the state of Israel today, and I look at those that make fun of people who are studying Torah. If newspaper articles come out and the restrictions that are placed upon us, and for example, it says, okay, so now we got lockdowns upon lockdowns. What can you and can you not do? One of the things that, thank God, still is open is the mikveh for women. If you don't understand the importance of that, look it up, basically. It is a basis to everything. And you have all these comments from the Erev Rav amongst Israel saying, wait a minute, I can't go to the beach, but these filthy Haredis can go to the mikveh. This is the kind of country that I live in. You understand the kind of separation that's going on here? Just so you understand where we are in the world, okay? And what's going on. People who speak like this, wouldn't want to be them. Of them it is written in Deuteronomy 2:11, they are also considered Rephaim as the Anakim, but the Moabites call them Emim, Deuteronomy 2:11, meaning that they are just as evil, devious, and harmful to Israel. But these are the ones who bring the world back to the condition of tohu vavohu, without form and void, chaos. And the secret of this matter is in the destruction of the temple, which is how the world was described at the time. Tohu vavohu, it was chaotic. So we know that the two groups who mixed with Israel, Giborim and Rephaim, which is also including the Anakim in there, when Israel's lights shine, theirs diminishes. It's very simple. Again, right now we're talking about the spirits that inhabit these people. How does a spirit of Anakim, Rephaim, nephilim inhabit these people, or Amalek? You stay away from the Torah. You could be born a Jew, but if you stay away from the Torah and you start speaking against the Torah and start speaking against those who learn Torah and who keep mitzvot and ridicule them, it's very clear what side you are on and what is going to happen to you. This is according to the words of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So I do not consider them Israel, neither does he, and neither should you. Again, actions, right? You can't paint everybody's this and everybody's that. Did not say that. Look at the actions of the individual. Now, we know that they are still here because only in the end of days will they be taken out. Meaning that they are here until the end as well to serve a purpose. And again, even before the end, God is bringing back all the evil, terrible spirits, reincarnating Israel's biggest enemies into bodies. They are currently in the world today. Why? The same reason that the Nazis wanted to bring all the Jews in the same place. It didn't work then, but hey, we're all in Israel now. We'll get to that too. We also know that there are many different ways to destroy Israel. There is the obvious by straight up extermination, right? Nazis, the Romans, kill all the Jews. Okay, fine. The others through assimilation, the Greeks and today's modern world. They're trying, hey, you feel Jewish? If not, it's cool. I'm pseudo-Jewish. Whatever. It's a nice hobby and whatnot. Now, if you look at Egypt, they tried it all. Oppression through hard labor, assimilation through witchcraft and intermarrying, annihilation through drowning of the male, the seeds of Jacob, in the river Nile, or killing them, drowning them in the water. But if you think about it, the only thing that somewhat cooled down was the straightforward, open killing approach, but that's only been in the last 70 years or so. We still have survivors telling us what happened there. And the same people who have seen that oppression grow are screaming in the world today that this is happening again, but no one seems to listen. Everything else, though, is still in play, though. Again, more Jews have been lost to intermarriage than, straight up anti-Semitic killings. We know that Amalek are still around, and they are working tirelessly, they don't rest, to finish the job, which is take us out. You see, it was more difficult to gather all the Jews in the world back then into death camps, because we're spread all over the world. But now, how convenient. All the Jews of the world are in one tiny country, surrounded by enemies that we, the powers that be, control. As soon as we let the dogs loose, then boom, they do our jobs for us, and then we can stand on the sidelines and say, oh, tisk, tisk. I say all the Jews in Israel because whoever is not here, that window is all but closed. I warned you. Anyway, once the stage is set, and this all has to do with God's timeline, it's time for a major shift. The exodus from Egypt, the destruction of the first temple, the fall of Babylon, the exodus from Persia, the fight against Greece, the cleansing of the second temple, the destruction of the second temple, the final exile, the fall of America, the mass exodus to Israel. Like I said, dead or alive, those sparks will be in the land. Because why were the Jews ever sent anywhere? Why you got to go there? Why did the Rebbe Milubavitch send all his people all over the world to gather the sparks of Kedusha? He did exactly what Yaakov was told to do by God. Go to Egypt. Go to the dark pits. Don't stand in the street corners and yell at people. Build a house, shine the light, and anyone that needs to come to you will come to you. That's how it's done properly. Why could they not just stay in Israel back in the day, right? Stay in the land of Israel and be fruitful and multiply there. Because then who would bring the sparks of Kedusha back home? The world still does not understand the task of Israel. In fact, I would venture to say that the overwhelming majority of Israel does not understand the task of Israel. At any point in history, when any country of the world embraced the Jews, that country thrived like never before. It's when they turned on them that they fell inevitably. Even Lavan, the chief wizard of the world, benefited from the presence of Jacob. He didn't have any sons until Jacob was there, and then he had sons, give birth to Bilam. Who would give birth to Bilam as his grandfather. So the question could then be asked, why do they turn on the Jews? Do they not enjoy the abundance? What, don't you love money and power and land and material things? Well, sure they do. But it's not about that. It's about recognition. When Pharaoh recognized Joseph, they proposed, they prospered. But when the new guy came, the Pharaoh that did not know Joseph supposedly, when he came along, how could it be that he didn't know Joseph? How could anyone in the world not know Joseph? Like we said, it was time for God to make a move. As we discussed last year, the difference between Mitzrayim and Mitzrayimah is key to understanding what's going on behind the scenes, as well as understanding God's plan for America and the world right now. Then is now. They are you. Like all things, we either get rewarded when we are good or spanked when we are bad. These are the two options of how Mashiach is supposed to arrive. When we are either deserving and loving and living according to the Torah, he will come in mercy. Or when we all have but lost our way and there is deceit and corruption in the world along with sexual immorality and perversion. That's when we have Mashiach coming in extreme judgment. So you tell me, in which way is Mashiach coming? I know what you're hoping, but let's get real so we can prepare. In which way is Mashiach coming? So, anyway, slowly but surely, even the good began to become corrupt. Back in Egypt, right? Wherever they go. And there were those very few of Israel left who actually saw and understood what was happening. And they refused to be fed the lies by their taskmasters. Mitzrayimah is Egypt, is the actual land of Egypt. And Mitzrayim is the spiritual entity, the governing angel of Egypt itself. A new king arose over Egypt who did not know about Joseph. Vayakam melech hadash al Mitzrayim. Governing angel, a new governing angel right now. Asher lo yedat Yosef. Now, does this governing angel do anything on its own? No, he has a boss. And now the time was approaching for the children of Israel to get together as one and call out to the God of their forefathers. All the sparks that were gathered, and now something had to happen before all the good ones would completely be gone. Like we said, they were on the 49th level of Tumah out of 50. You get to 50, you're done. There's no coming back. Now, did this happen right away? Of course not. This took over 80 years to cook up. And like all good plans, they needed to be incorporated slowly but surely in order for the general public just to go along with it like mindless idiots and accept the new reality. Did they call out to God? No, they did not. They listened to those in charge, those who wouldn't dare lie or deceive them. The only ones who didn't fall for this garbage were the tribe of Levy and other scattered individuals from among the rest of the tribes. But everyone else became slaves to the system. Let's read the backstory from the book of Jasher, okay? Also the Midrash. So the king answered the elders of Egypt and said unto them, This is the plan advised against Israel, from which we will not depart. Behold, in the land of Pitom and Ramses, cities unfortified against battle. We're going to tell them this story, all right? It behooves you and us to build them and to fortify them. Oh no, there's an invisible danger coming to get you. We all got to get in on this. Now, therefore, go you also and act cunningly towards them, and proclaim a voice in Egypt and in Goshen at the command of the king, saying, All ye men of Egypt, Goshen, Pathros, and all their inhabitants, the king has commanded us to build Pitom and Ramses, and to fortify them for battle. Who amongst you, of all of Egypt, of the children of Israel, and of all the inhabitants of the city, are willing to build with us, shall each have his wages given to him daily. If you do this, you will receive amenities and, basic rights. So go you first, and do cunningly, and gather yourselves, and come to Pitom and Ramses to build. In other words, get on a public stage and show the people what you want them to do. Not really doing it yourselves, it's all staged, obviously. But go where everyone can see and say, hey, do this. I, as the leader of this district, is doing it. You do it too now. Right. And whilst you are building, cause a proclamation of this kind to be made throughout Egypt every day at the command of the king. And when some of the children of Israel shall come to build with you, you shall give them their wages daily for a few days. Oh, you're good. Yes, hey, guess what? You could travel freely now for 2,000 meters. And after they shall have built with you for their daily hire, drag yourselves away from them daily, one by one in secret. And then you shall rise up and become their taskmasters and officers, and you shall leave them afterwards to build without wages. And should they refuse, then force them with all your might to build. And if you do this, it will be well with us to strengthen our land against the children of Israel, for an account of the fatigue of the building and the work. The children of Israel will decrease, because you will deprive them from their wives day by day. And all the elders of Egypt heard the counsel of the king, and the counsel seemed good in their eyes, and in the eyes of the servants of Pharaoh, and in the eyes of all of Egypt, and they did according to the word of the king. Yep. And all the servants went away from the king, and they caused a proclamation to be made in all of Egypt, in Tachpanchus, in Goshen, and in all the cities which surrounded Egypt, saying, you have seen what the children of Esau and Ishmael did to us. You've seen what those other dangers did. Not really, because Israel kicked their butts. They were perfectly safe. There was no danger. But you create one, for compliance. You see what I'm saying? It's a very old trick. Where was it? Why am I even reading this? Whoever of you from all of Egypt and the children of Israel will come to build with us, he shall have his daily wages given by the king. Gold star for you. Yellow star maybe. As his command is unto us. And when Egypt and all the children of Israel heard all the servants of Pharaoh have spoken, they came from the Egyptians and the children of Israel to build with the servants of Pharaoh, Pithom and Ramses, but none of the children of Levy came with their brethren to build. And all the servants of Pharaoh and his princes came at first with deceit to build with all Israel as daily hired laborers. And they gave to Israel their daily hire at the beginning. It says, my people perish for lack of knowledge. Here's knowledge. Take it, and maybe don't perish. And the servants of Pharaoh built with all Israel and were employed in that work with Israel for a month. And at the end of 1 month, all the servants of Pharaoh began to withdraw secretly from the people of Israel. And Israel went on with the work at the time, but they then received their daily hire because some of the men of Egypt were yet carrying on the work with Israel at the time, slowly but surely. Therefore the Egyptians gave Israel their hire in those days, in order that they, the Egyptians, their fellow workmen, might also take the pay for their labor. And at the end of the year and 4 months, all the Egyptians had withdrawn from the children of Israel, so that the children of Israel were left alone engaged at work. And after all the Egyptians had withdrawn from the children of Israel, they returned and became oppressors and officers over them. And some of them stood over the children of Israel as taskmasters to receive from them all that they gave from them for the pay of their labor. And the Egyptians did this in this manner to the children of Israel day by day, in order to afflict their work. And all the children of Israel were alone, engaged in labor. And the Egyptians refrained from giving them any payment to the children of Israel from that time forward. And when some of the men of Israel refused to work on account of the wages not being given to them, then the exactors and the servants of Pharaoh oppressed them and smote them with heavy blows, and made them return by force to labor with their brethren. Thus did all the Egyptians unto the children of Israel all those days. What happens if you oppose? And all the children of Israel were greatly afraid of the Egyptians in this matter, and all the children of Israel turned and worked alone without pay. What happens if you do work without pay? It's called slavery, right? And the children of Israel built Pithom and Ramses, and all the children of Israel did the work, some making bricks and some building. And the children of Israel built and fortified all the land of Egypt and its walls, because they were being attacked like crazy, right? They knew this common sense. Like, wait a minute, nobody's attacking us. Oh, but you say we're being attacked, so yeah. Probably giving out leaflets in the street of stone, right? And the children of Israel were engaged in work for many years until the time came when the Lord remembered them and brought them out of Egypt. But the children of Levy were not employed in the work with their brethren of Israel from the beginning unto the day of their going forth from Egypt. For all the children of Levy knew that the Egyptians had spoken all these words with deceit to the Israelites. Therefore the children of Levy refrained from approaching to work with their brethren. It's like, no, I'll suffer the consequences. You go ahead, do what they say, comply. And the Egyptians did not direct their attention to make the children of Levy work afterwards, since they had not been with their brethren at the beginning. Therefore the Egyptians left them alone. Like, okay, they're more difficult to deal with. Right now, let's just handle the sheep. And the hands of the men of Egypt were directed with continued severity against the children of Israel in work, and the Egyptians made the children of Israel work with rigor. Once you start getting into the system, you can't think of getting out of the system because this is all you know. You are oppressed. You will not even think to cry out to God. And the Egyptians embittered the lives of the children of Israel with hard work in mortar and bricks, and also in the matter of work in the field. And the children of Israel called Melol, the king of Egypt, Meror, the king of Egypt, because in his days the Egyptians have embittered their lives with all manner of work. And all the work wherein the Egyptians made the children of Israel labor, they exacted with rigor in order to afflict the children of Israel. But the more they afflicted them, the more they increased and grew. And the Egyptians were grieved because of the children of Israel. So, you see, it all starts slowly but surely. They've done it there, they're doing it now. You control the economy, you control the people. All the money goes to the government. That's called communism, by the way. Anyway, this was before they even started killing the babies, just so you understand. And as for the tribe of Levi, they saw what was going on and they did not go along with the masses. Not only there, but also during the sin of the golden calf, they did not partake. As a result of their separation from the system, God created a new system through them, the tribe of Levi. Judgment and mercy, as we discussed, the Levites and the Kohanim. How did this happen? The tribe of Levi, they never stopped learning Torah. That's why they also became the Torah teachers. If you stick to the Torah, you're not going to fall for this garbage. And of course, people say learn Torah, but they go with this. I'm sorry. No, I don't believe you. And of course, Moses, Aaron, and Miriam of the tribe of Levi. The legit Holy Trinity. But still, it took over 80 years until the Redeemer, Moses, was sent to the people. Moses was 80. And this was happening before he was born. How long was this thing? I think I taught on it. It was like 86 years. That's exactly how old Miriam was at the time. She was 6 years older than Moses. Aaron was 83, Moses was 80. In other words, 3-year gap between them. Miriam comes from Mar. In other words, the embitterment started then. Or was it 87? Got to find the teaching. Anyway. Why did it take so long? Why did it take 80 years? It took so long because every minute they spent in Egypt outside the realm of Torah, they began to clothe themselves with the filth and impurity. They mamash became part of the system, layers upon layers of it. They didn't even know who they were anymore. So when they cried, for whatever reason, their cries could not break through these levels of impurity that they chose to cover themselves with. Exodus 3:7, and the Lord said, this when he finally told Moses why he came, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and I have heard their cries because of their slave drivers, for I know their pains. Of course I have seen their affliction from the beginning. I see everything. What, I didn't see it? Yeah, I saw it. I saw from when it started. Not only that, hey, I'm also the one that put it into place, mind you, but only now has their cry ascended. It finally broke through from the pits of impurity to the heavens. Now I'm coming down, right? Because now they really want it. Now I got the attention of their souls. You understand? It was genuine crying to God. Meaning, now that they reached me, and they did it all together as one. recognizing that the Egyptians are not their answer, that their neighbors are not their answer, that certainly Pharaoh was not their answer. Finally, after all options have been utterly exhausted by them, finally, after realizing that I am the only one with the power to save, and finally, after coming together as one nation, unfortunately, this unity brought about tremendous trials and tribulations, i.e. troubles, did they decide to scream to me from the depths of their souls. And so today, this is what will happen, and ultimately, those that will be left will scream from the depths of their souls, Ki ein lanu al mi leishen, rak al Avinu shabashamayim. We have no one to lean upon, only in our Father, on our Heavenly Father. And then I heard, and now Moses, here we are. Moses. ומשה היה רואה את צאן יתרו, חותנו, כהן מדיין, וינהג את הצאן אחר המדבר, ויבוא אל הר האלוהים חורבה. Moses was pasturing the flocks of Jethro, his father-in-law, the chief of Midian, and he led the flocks after the free pasture land, and he came to the mountain of God, to Chorev, or Choreva, actually. We're going to break this down now, so we can see what kind of man is to come, who is to redeem us from the troubles that God had set before us. Redeem does not mean take our struggle away, okay? No man or woman in Israel got anything handed to them. They had to fight and struggle even while the first Redeemer, Moses, was already publicly in their midst doing the Lord's bidding. They still suffered. And that was on them, not on him. They had to do tshuva. They had to clean themselves up. They had to slaughter the idolatrous lamb god and follow the letter of the law to a T. And those that failed along the way were taken in the darkness. That's 80%. What do you think is going to happen today? Acharit kereshit. The end redemption will be like the first redemption. 80%. And if any man or woman in the world today thinks it's going to be different, then you're not reading the Torah. Umoshe haya ro'eh. Moses was a shepherd. This should tell us all we need to know. Who are the most famous shepherds in Israel? Who are the guys who actually tended sheep? Let's start with Jacob, okay? Because it was really Jacob. Jacob, he had 6 million sheep, and he tithed 600,000, right, to God. So Jacob, when Jacob first arrived at Padan Aram, he was gathered by 3 flocks. He came to the well. Think about it. Jacob coming to well, water, Torah. 3 flocks gathering around him of other shepherds, but of course they're representing the 3 tiers of Israel: Kohen, Levy, and Israel. In addition to Genesis 30:36, and he set 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob tended Lavan's remaining animals. Ve'Yaakov ro'eh, shepherd, et tzon, right, the sheep, and Lavan's sheep. No, nevertheless, a person who was absolutely wicked. And then he worked God's system, as we discussed, and he began to multiply his own livestock like crazy. You see, Jacob is the one who started his own unique flock. Yaakov, Israel, the children of Israel. Jacob was the father of that. Jacob who built Sukkot for said sheep in the same place where Israel would rest in Sukkot. They had room for 600,000 people over there, the 600,000 souls, the 600,000 of Jacob's flock that were given to God as a tithe. You see this? This is not to say that Abraham and Isaac were not shepherds in their own right. Of course they were. But the emphasis is on Jacob, and that's what we're going with, especially given everything that I just shared with you. He's also the culmination of mercy and judgment, which you need both of. Next? We got Joseph. As we mentioned, all the sons of Jacob were shepherds. That's what their business was. Just like their father before them. but it specifically mentions Joseph as shepherd. He was a shepherd, along with shepherding his brothers, right? Foreshadowing. And we see this in Parashat Toldot. Later, he fed them, his brothers, and he cared for them just like a good shepherd does. Who's next on the list? We're going in order right now. We got Moses, okay, right here. Umoshe haya ro'eh. We'll get into this shortly, don't worry. It's all about Moses right now. Incidentally, and I've mentioned this before, who does it say was the very first shepherd in the Torah? Genesis 4:2. Vatosef laledet lechav et hevel vayehi hevel ro'eh tzon. And Abel was a shepherd of flocks. And as we've discussed, Moses was a reincarnation of Abel. Why did he have to reincarnate as Abel? Because one of Abel's sins was that he looked at the Shekhinah. When Moses looks upon a burning bush, when he realizes what it is, he averts his gaze. We'll also get to that too. In other words, he did a tikkun. That neshama did a tikkun for the piece of neshama of Abel that failed in that very thing. Who else we got? Probably the most significant, right, in our Torah. David, 1 Samuel 16:11. The youngest still remains, and behold, he is tending the sheep. Od sha'ar akatan vehine ro'eh batzon. Now, we have our 4 shepherds who just so happen to be occupying the entirety of the central column of the Sfirot, which, as we know, is the culmination of both mercy and judgment. The knowledge, where is it? Here we go. Look at this. This is beautiful. Moses, Jacob, Joseph, David, central column of the Sfirot. This is Moses' knowledge, a combination of chokhmah and binah, knowledge of the supernal secrets through wisdom and understanding. Boom, Moses. The heart and body of the Jewish people through which the Torah flows. Jacob. The fundamental covenant, Yesod, through which God's goodness and abundance flows to the world. Right here, Joseph. And Malchut, the kingdom which is built brick by metaphoric brick, in order to receive from the central column itself and rise to the crown. This is King David. Dat, Tiferet, Yesod, Malchut. And once Malchut receives it all, Malchut rises all the way up to Keter. Mashiach ben David. All shepherds, all righteous, all necessary. And what does a shepherd do? But lead his sheep between the straits. This is what a shepherd does. This is the job of the shepherd. Between the right and between the left, between the narrow passes, the shepherd tells the sheep exactly where to go. And he leads the sheep. What is between the straits? It's called Bein HaMetzarim, right? We learn, Min HaMetzar karataya. From the straits I called Taya. Anani b'merchavia. And he answered from the great expanse. I was very curious about this. Something called me to do this. So I looked into this. Bein HaMetzarim. Exactly, in between the straits. In other words, the job of the shepherd, okay, has a numerical value of 447. Jacob lived 147 years. Joseph, 110. Moses, 120. David, 70. Together, that's 447. It is the shepherds of God who will lead us through the straits. I thought it was cool. Where God himself is the shepherd, he's the good shepherd, as David would come to say in Psalms 23, as we all know, the Lord is my shepherd, right? But even the general has a commanding officer who must lead the troops either into battle or retreat to safety. These are our shepherds right here. Furthermore, I found it fascinating that the Torah never spells shepherd with the letter Vav. Ro'ez, if you spell it today, you would do Resh, Vav, Ayin, Hey. But in the Torah it spells Resh, Ayin, Hey. Now what do we learn about the Vav? What does the Vav represent? The Vav represents mercy, God's mercy. Generally speaking, as well as from the 4-letter, got this. Okay, so we gave the 4-letter name of God. So we have the Yud, which is, there's several ways to do it. It could be Yud K and then Vav K, or it could be Yud and then K and then Vav Ze'ir Anpin K. In any case, the Ze'ir Anpin is always the Vav. Okay? Now, so the Vav represents the Ze'ir Anpin in any case, regardless. And what does the Ze'ir Anpin represent? It represents the Torah, as we've learned. Now, if you don't have a letter Vav within the word Ro'eh, then you can just as easily, without even punctuation, read it as Ra'ah, evil, wickedness. As in the reason the world was destroyed in Noah's flood, the reason the generation of the tower were dispersed, the reason Sodom and Gomorrah were burned. Which shows us that if a shepherd, a leader of any kind that does not live according to the Vav, the Torah, he becomes the Vav himself, you see? Meaning, if they do not represent Torah themselves inside the shepherding, then what they are doing is considered Ra'ah, evil in the eyes of God, and all those who follow them are led astray. And of course, they will fall into this, all the sheep that are following the shepherd who does not live according to the Torah, other sheep in wolf's clothing, they will be led astray into the Ra'ah themselves. I've warned you of this so many times, and I've given you so many reasons. I've done what I can. I'm doing what I can. The Zohar states that the shepherd leads his flock with righteousness, to distance them from stealing, from all the ra'ah, to lead them on a plain, and at all times the rod and the staff is in their hand, so they do not turn to the left or to the right. These are the words of the Zohar. Now, I was pondering on Psalms 91 over Shabbat, particularly verse 7. I saw something beautiful on Friday night. We daven outside now. It's funny, we can barely get a minyan for Shacharit, barely get 10 guys. But for Friday night, there's like 200 people coming, and we're all outside. And I saw the progression of this guy from a few months ago. One of the gabbais over there always brought him close. Here, come, you sit next to me. He took a chair, always put it next to him. And this guy, you could see he was like completely secular. He felt out of place. He felt awkward, but the guy kept on loving on him. I always like to sit in the back because I always like to see what's going on, you know? So he brought him near all the time, and after months and months and months, and then this Friday night, I see that same guy who started off like completely secular. He's wearing tzitzit now. You know, it was amazing. It was amazing. And then I was thinking about Psalms 91, about how many have to fall, how much garbage is out there, but sticking your hand in excrement just to pull out one diamond is worth it. You understand? That guy's a diamond right there. This is what Jacob is tasked on doing. So this really hit me on Friday night. It was beautiful. Anyway, 91:7, written by Moses, by the way. Vayipol mitzidcha elef urvava miyaminecha elecha lo yigash. 1,000 will be stationed at your side. It actually says ipol, will fall at your side, and 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not approach you. So what side is what? And what is the significance of these numbers over here? Furthermore, why did Moses write this? So long story short, now how do we know that Moses wrote it? Because it says on Psalms 90 that Moses wrote it, and until it says Le David, we know that Moses wrote the following Psalms. You could just look it up yourself. So here's a long story short. Your side, ipol mitzidcha, what is the side without mentioning if it's left or right? Since it does not mention what side it is, but then it does mention right in the next verse, we know it's the left side. As the left side we know is judgment. And as the Ramad explains, that if you stand straight in the middle, in between what may seem as the metzarim, the straits, you yourself will be able to take out 1,000 enemies who will fall by the merit of your own righteous judgment, which is necessary, while God shows off his strength from the right and takes out 10 times that amount, 10,000. Nevertheless, Elecha lo egash, but it will not approach you. Who are these that will not approach you? What are these enemies? The two earlier verses, 5 and 6. You will not fear the fright of night, lo tira mipachad laila michetz yauf yomam, the arrow that fires by day. Umidever ba'ofel yaloch, umiketev yeshut zoraim, pestilence that prowls in darkness, destruction that ravages at noon. Specific times of day are specific. Okay, during the day, I didn't even write this down. The psalm is going on. Anyway, during the daytime, the demons and the powers of darkness don't have permission to come out. They do not roam freely. Okay? But chetz and dever ba'ofel, kotev yeshud, kotev, there are demons that come out specifically to do tasks, and that's why they're called arrows. At noon, right, or during the day, the arrows that are fired during the day, God says to that demon, go harm that person, go harm that person. They don't have permission to do it by themselves. But as soon as the sun sets, it's their domain now. This is where people have to be extra careful, especially during auspicious times, especially Bein HaMetzarim, the 3 weeks from when is it? Up until Tisha B'Av. Tammuz. Right. From Tammuz to Av, those 3 weeks over there, Jerusalem was under siege. Now, the rabbis, Chazal, and the Talmud, it says, do not go out alone at night to a segregated place because you will most likely be harmed during these times. Bein HaMetzarim, very specifically. So if you listen to the shepherds, you won't even go there, you won't be harmed. Anyway, these are demons, okay, that are given tasks and or permission to harm those who do not dwell in the covenant with the Most High and will lodge in the shadow of the enemy instead of the shadow of the Almighty. He also said that if man could actually see all the surrounding enemies all the time, for a split second, for a moment, if men knew what was out there currently right now, in wherever we are right now, he would not be able to live from fear. You die from fear if God reveals to you what's what. Moses saw what was what and he didn't flinch. That's why he's Moses. However, in today's day and age, although they are not given permission to show their true form that would frighten men to death, they come in forms of fear. Al tira mipachad, do not fear. And God help us. Yeah, that's working though. Fear. Used to be money that made the world go around. Now it's just fear. So what do? How do we fight? We don't. This is God's fight. I've spoken to plenty of you. I hear a lot of, I want to fight. You know what you have to do. What are you going to do against the demonic forces? You pray. This is your strength. These are not your strength. Your connection to God, that is your strength. That is what can actually do something. But it's a submission to actually doing that. Because you think it's passive and not being proactive. There are things in this world that you have to prepare yourself, and that's how you get it done. I'll tell you stories another time. Anyway, this is God's fight. We're just here to help him. Help him. We're here to be on his side. This is for us. You got to stick to him and his Torah and keep your eyes open so you can actually see what's going on around you for real. And not what they're showing you, but see. How can you see? Read the Torah, read the Parashat, read Shmot, and see what's currently happening in the world. How about that? It's very simple. You don't need to go all Kabbalistic and whatnot. Read the Parsha and understand your life now. That's why the Torah came from God. It's timeless. Or as Moses said, you will but gaze with your eyes, and you will see the annihilation of the wicked. Don't do anything. Right? Rak be'einecha tabit v'shilumat reshaim tireh. But I digress. On a deeper level, it is said about Moses, going back, keeping the flock, that one who does so is ready to accept the yoke of the kingdom of heaven. Ol lekabel al atzmo ol malchut shamayim. If the shepherd is a simpleton, It is said of him, there is more hope for a fool than him. This is Proverbs 26:12. If you see a man who is wise in his own eyes, there is more hope for a fool than for him. And how many simpletons have I met who believe in themselves? There is more hope for a fool than him indeed. Now, the question is asked, why sheep? Why not cows? Right? Why sheep? Because this is how God himself refers to us. Sheep, obviously, they need to be led. Sheep are led. Who's leading them and where? That's a different story. We are God's sheep. And as David said, the Lord is my shepherd. But Ezekiel 34:31, and you are my flocks, the flocks of my pasture. You are men, I am your God, says the Lord. Ve'aten tzoni, tzon mereiti, adam atem. Ani Elohechem ne'um Hashem Elohim. And chapter 36, Ezekiel 36, verses 37 and 38. So says the Lord, I will yet for this be inquired of by the house of Israel, to do for them, I will multiply them, the man like a flock of sheep, like the flocks appointed for the holy offering, like the flocks of Jerusalem on the festivals, so will these cities now laid waste be filled with flocks of men, and they shall know that I am the Lord. Hallelujah. So when he sees his beloveds, when God sees his beloveds, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, and David, our shepherds, and how they tended the flock of sheep, be it breeding them, starting them, right? Jacob, caring for those who were not their own, or fighting bears and lions for every last one. This is David. God can see his own attributes in these very individuals. And he says, yep, you are my man right there. Moses, the most humble and the highest. Yosef, a tzaddik. Tiferet Israel, Jacob, whose face is on my throne. And David, a man after my own heart. You're the guys. Great. I concur. Humbly. I'm grateful. It is no wonder that they are our identity in Israel, of Israel. The giver of the law and the highest prophets to have ever lived. This is Moses. And of course, the two messiahs, right? Ben Yosef and Ben David. And speaking of Mashiach and the end of days, why not throw in there the world to come as well? The Zohar states that one who offers up sheep upon the altar is to attain life in this world, right? Now I am clean, now I can live. And he who leads Israel properly will attain life in the world to come. Our shepherds. They carry the lambs after the mother gives birth, so neither of them will tire. So should the leader of Israel lead them mercifully and without cruelty. Again, you look at whoever is a leader and see how they treat their own flock. Do they do it with mercy or do they do it with pride? It's right in front of you. As the good shepherd will save the sheep from wolves and lions, so shall the leader of Israel, if he is in fact good, saves them from heathens, idolaters, and the judgments from below and above, while guiding them into the life of the world to come and not letting them fall, not leading them into, well, whatever. Moses was such a faithful shepherd that God chose him to tend his flock, us, as he handled each sheep according to their needs. Men, women, young, old, you see, to even converts. To bolster this point, the Torah says specifically the flocks of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, meaning that he treated other people's sheep as good as he would treat his own. And even more so, although Jethro was an idolater, his father-in-law, of course, the priest of whoa, what is going on there? He didn't compromise his morals and standards. So, let's read the verse again. ומשה רואה את צאן יתרו חותנו כהן מדיין וינהג את hatzon achar midbar vayavo el har Elohim choreva. So it says Moses was pasturing the flocks of Jethro, his father-in-law, the chief of Midian, and he led the flocks after. It says the free pasture land. Why does it say that? I don't know. Hamidbar, that's what it says. And he came to the mountain of God, Choreva. Vainhag et atzon achar hamidbar. And he led the flocks after the wilderness. But we need the Hebrew here. So it's Hamidbar. Hamidbar also can be read as Hamedaber, after he who speaks. Right? Because it would make no sense for a good shepherd to lead the flock into the wilderness, especially into that wilderness. We know what wilderness that's in. Away from the green pastures and away from shade and water. That is the wilderness that kills everything. But he led them into green pastures every day. Until that day, he took care of them. But that day, on this day, Moses followed the medaber, the speaker, the word, the sound, the voice. Just like the book of Numbers is called Bamidbar, Bamedaber, it has the same connection. Now we've been learning about Moses for years in our teachings. So we know from the moment that he was born, he was destined for greatness. And yet still he needed 80 years in order to correct himself. It wasn't just, hey, you're born and now you can do all this stuff. 80 years he needed in order to correct himself, for him to do what he needed to do for 40 years. Now I was thinking about this too, okay? Moses picked up where Joseph left off, right? Joseph was the last shepherd of Israel. So check this out. I mean, it's Jacob, it's Joseph, it's Moses, and then later on is David, and even Solomon. Watch this. This is really cool. Moses picked up where Joseph left off. Joshua picked up where Moses left off. Joshua was a descendant of Joseph, right? Menashe. Joseph reigned for, we discussed this, 80 years. Joseph reigned for 80 years. Moses needed 80 years prep time. Joshua of the tribe of Ephraim, the son of Joseph, reigned for how many years? 28 years. Joseph needed 28 years for his prep time. You see this? Now, I know Joseph was imprisoned for 12 years when he was 18, which means he was 30 when he became the ruler of Egypt. But we also know that because he sinned in prison, he put this faith in the guard. He said, remember me, so that you might get me out of here. God gave him an extra 2 years, but he was ready after 28 years. Those 2 extra years were just for that, but he was ready. 28 years to 28 years. You see this? Now for the cherry. Moses, 80 years of prep time, or 40 years rule, you tell me, were given to King David and King Solomon, each reigning for 40 years for a total of 80 years. You see, King David united the kingdoms. Judah and Israel became David Melech Israel, and King Solomon built the temple. This shows me that our ancestors and forefathers and everything that they went through, they paved the way for us to do what we needed to do, what we currently need to do. I mean, we knew this. We've learned that it's never, ever, ever about one person. That's in other religions. One man does it all. Not in Judaism. Not according to the Torah. It's absolutely the opposite. It's according to everyone. Everyone does. This is what it is. And we see the plan of God unfolding right before our very eyes. We have to have confidence that we are all relevant. And yet again, I digress. So we'll get back. So Moses was spiritually led by the Ruach HaKodesh that day to go out dafka into the wilderness. The same wilderness that he would tend God's flock for 40 years. Arriving at the same mountain that he would ascend in order to receive the Torah. God's mountain, Horeb, aka Mount Sinai. Moses was pasturing the flocks of Jethro, his father-in-law, the chief of Midian, and he led the flocks after the free pasture land into the Midbar, whatever, and he came to the mountain of God, to Choreva. Vayavo el har haelokim choreva. And he came to the mountain of God, Choreva. Choreva hinting that the Shekhinah was waiting for him right there, as we know. In that very place. When he ascended the mountain, he did so without the sheep, as they remained at the foot of the mountain. He sent them away. He's like, okay, I need to go here. You sit tight. I'm going there. Now, keep this in mind. This was written almost 2,000 years ago. Rabbi Yitzchak said, there is a stone that draws and receives metal. He's describing a magnet. And the metal jumps on it when it sees it. So with Moses to Mount Sinai, when they appeared to each other, he was attracted to Mount Sinai like metal to a magnet. Rabbi Abba said, they were designated from the 6 days of creation, the one together with the other. On that day, the mountain quaked before Moses. It's like with excitement. It's like, finally. When he saw him entering it and jumping upon it, the mountain quieted. Finally. You know how long I've been waiting, man. And this teaches us that they were very happy with each other. Moses was comfortable there. Rabbi Yanai said, Moses knew it was the mountain of God, as it is written, El Har Elokim. We learned what Moses saw on the mountain. He saw birds fly, spreading their wings and yet not approaching it. Rabbi Yitzchak said he saw birds flying and soaring from there and then falling at his feet. See, it also goes upwards. When he saw this, he made sure that the flock didn't come near the mountain. An angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire from within the thorn bush. And behold, the thorn bush. It just says hasne. It doesn't even say thorn bush. It just says the bush. There are thorns on here, and we will explain. But the thorn bush was not being consumed. Vehasne einenu ukal. Now, we know that as a shepherd, the aspect and attribute of mercy has to be your driving force. We've learned this. It's kindness, it's compassion. It's putting myself first. You understand? For your sake. Doing whatever it takes. I will fight lions and tigers and bears. Oh my. There was no one else in the history of the world who could behold the fire of God and not fear it, but rather he drew near to it. He was attracted to it. Once he realized what it was, that it was actually the Shekhinah, he averted his gaze, right? I told you, he made a tikkun for Abel right there, but he never feared it. Out of respect, you do not look at the Shekhinah. Later on, he says, show me your glory. And God's like, you can't see my glory and live. He understood this now. In other words, Moses' mercy, his own mercy, matched the fire of judgment that was coming to the world. The burning of the bush representing Israel would have to go through the judgment, but it was the fearless mercy of Moses who would lead them through the fire as the bush was not consumed. But there's one thing that was consumed. What do we say? It was a thorn bush, right? And that's why they, us, had to and will have to go through the fire of God's judgment. So what are the thorns? And here's the warning to the world, the nations, the era of Rav, Isaiah 33. Now I will rise, says the Lord. Now I will be raised. Now I will be exalted. You shall conceive chaff. You shall bear stubble. Your breath is fire. It shall consume you. Here the fire is consuming. And the peoples, Vayu Amim, peoples, the nations, shall be as the burning of lime, severed thorns, with fire they shall be burnt, off of my holy people. Hearken, you far off ones, what I did, and know, you near ones, my might. All you and all mine. And it says, Kovim gvurati, gvura, my judgments, not even might, it's judgments. You will know my judgments. You know my judgments are coming. And here are the fakers, the posers, the tourists within Israel, not only within our borders, but anyone who calls himself Israel but is not. God knows this is for you. Sinners of Zion were afraid. Trembling seized the flatterers. Who will stand up for us against the consuming fire? They know what's coming. Who will stand up for us against the everlasting fires? Remember we read last week, they made a deal with death. Death will save us. So who's making it through? Who is making it through these judgments? How does one go through the fire to be purified, yet not consumed? Verse 15, he who walks righteously and speaks honestly, who condemns gain of oppression. In Hebrew it says, Mo'es bevetza, nim'asli. I've had enough of this oppression of gains and gimme. Betza is, what do you call it? Tavat betza. It's like lusting, gluttony, all that stuff. Who shakes his hands from taking hold of bribes, closes his ears from hearing of blood, and closes his eyes from seeing evil. This is how you protect yourself from the fire that is about to hit the world. And we know it's coming. He shall dwell on high. Rocky fortresses shall be his defense. His bread shall be given him, his water sure. Because why else would you need God's high rocky fortress if there wasn't trouble coming on the ground? Why would you need to be given bread if there wasn't going to be a shortage of food? Why would you need to be given water if there wasn't any water to be given? And of course, spiritually speaking, bread and water, Torah and mitzvot. If there's no internet, right, and you can't hear Torah classes, you better make sure that you have your own Torah and that you familiarize yourself with it. Nothing else matters. It is because of Moses that we can survive the fire. Again, Moses is the law. It's fire itself. If you are a Jew and you are not living according to the law of Moses, fill in the blanks. And how do we know that Moses comes from mercy and can enter into the fire unscathed? Exodus 2:10. The child grew up. She brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became like a son to her. She named him Moses, and she said, for I drew him from the water. Kimin hamayim ashitu. His name is Moses, and he came from the water. That's why he can walk into the fire. We should follow him into the fire and be unscathed. And how do we know that he is the only one who can walk into this fire, fearless and unscathed? Exodus 2:18, the people remained far off, but Moses drew near to the opaque darkness where God was. Arafel, it was a smoky fire, right? This is Exodus 20, right after we received Aseret HaDibot, the 10 Commandments. Vayamod ha'am merachok, the people did not go to the mountain, just like the flock did not go to the mountain. So, if you allow fear to dictate your life, again, the actual concept of fear that causes you to make decisions on a daily basis, you are living in idolatry and you will not survive the fire. Because you see what's going on and you forget that God is in control. You forget the very first command. Anochi, Adonai Elohecha, asher hotzeticha me'eretz Mitzrayim mibeit avadim. I am, Anochi, I alone am the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Why is that the first command? I am the Lord your God. Great. Who took you out of the land of Egypt and out of the house of bondage. Why is that there? You cry and you weep and you complain to your overlords for your poor state, and then thank them and then kiss their feet when they allow you to go to the supermarket to buy some food, or when they graciously permit you to venture 1,000 meters away from your home. Thank you so much. You kind and wise masters, you clearly have our best interests at heart. I am the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt. I alone am the Lord your God. I alone brought you to Egypt. I alone placed you in the house of bondage. And it is I alone who will take you out. Don't forget it. Moses was pasturing the flocks of Jethro, his father-in-law, the chief of Midian, and he led the flocks to the Midbar. I'm so sorry about the English. And he came to the mountain of God, to Cholev. The whole story is right here in front of you. Not only in this verse of what's going to happen to the children of Israel, but at everything. Moses, the faithful shepherd, was shepherding a flock that were not his own, leading them as he was following the word of God into the wilderness, to the fiery mountain of God to receive the Torah. And this is what we need to hold on to. Am I saying the same thing over and over again? Maybe, but so are they, and so is God. And this is how it's been from the beginning. Why? For a time such as this. Imagine Moses' frustration when they strayed back then and they witnessed all these wonders. And still I tell you that we are more blessed or cursed than that generation in the wilderness, and it's up to you now, the individual. Jeremiah 16, therefore behold, days are coming, says the Lord, and it shall no longer be said, as the Lord lives, who brought up the children of Israel from the land of Egypt. This great thing that we need to remember will be passé. Oh yes, but that's only when God says it, not when other people do. But we will say, as the Lord lives, who brought up the children of Israel from the northland and from the lands where he has driven them out. This is the kibbutz galuyot. In other words, all the miracles that they witnessed back in Egypt are going to pale in comparison for what is about to go down. And I will restore them to their land that I gave to their forefathers. We will all, make no mistake, we will all go through the fire. We absolutely have to. Not only to remove the erev rav from within our ranks and our leaders or wherever, and within our midst, but to remove the erev rav, the impurities that remain within ourselves. You all know it's coming a day. You know it's coming. You are being tested. You know this. Do not fail. We're going now week by week, day by day. You do not rely on these teachings to learn Torah. You don't do it, or anybody else's teachings to learn Torah. You learn Torah. You read Torah. You do this. When everything else is inaccessible, what are you going to do? You know what? Up. That's your answer. You have your eyes on no man, only on God. You are being tested. Do not fail. From this week, the reading of Exodus, until the date of the Exodus of Pesach, the actual event, expect to see some things. As for us, our Exodus begins now. I hope I see you all on the other side.